We are in Accelerating Early Learning, our school readiness breakout, just so you know that you're in the right place. If you're not in the right place, you can go down to the breakout room button and say leave room, but not leave meeting, and go back and make a selection for a different breakout room if you would so choose. But this is the breakout for Accelerating Early Learning, and we are excited that you're able to join us today. As everybody is coming in, this is a great time to use our chat feature and find out how you are looking at things. And our question that we'd love for you to answer in chat is, what do young children need now to help develop their potential in the future? And if you were able to join our keynote presentation with Sylvia Acevedo, she talked about some of the things that influenced her. I also heard so many great and inspiring things from our student and educator panel. And of course, those were older students, but thinking about that connection and the desire to be really connected and with people is one of those things that's important. But as you are looking at that and settling in, just feel free to put that answer right into the chat. And that way, myself and my panelists, all the participants can see that, and we can feed off that great energy when we do start. I'm keeping kind of track on how many people are still unassigned in the breakout rooms that we have to make sure that we will start when we kind of have a critical mass as we're working together. I'm seeing a lot of great things come in chat, and thank you guys for that support. And it does echo a lot of what we heard from our student panel, the social emotional skills, positive relationships with teachers, and teachers that have specific training in positive relationships, and really having families as part of it. Alex, you're near to dear and to my heart of early identification of developmental concerns and supports for families and children. That's another key thing. I think David would also echo that in terms of the work Texans Care does on early childhood intervention and support. Well, I thank you guys for sharing that and putting that into chat today. Not seeing, I get to keep a track of the main room and our breakout session room, and we're getting kind of a trickle of maybe 1 or 2 people who are going to be coming in. I see some names on that list who I know are our early childhood folks who may want to be in here, or they may choose to go to a different section because they know this information. but I don't want to delay too much longer before getting started because we have such a great time together today and looking at what we're going to be doing. But I do invite you to get energy from each other, look at that information into the chat as we answer that question, and get ready for all this work together today. And so excited to do that. Later in this presentation, I'm just teasing you a little bit. We're going to be having a fantastic pre-K panel. And so we have Amy Cortes-Castillo from AISD, Director of Early Childhood with us, David Feigen from the Texans Care for Children, Early Childhood Policy Associate. We have Kendra Winans, who is the Senior Director of State and Federal Programs at Leander ISD, and Charlotte Zemo, who is our Early Childhood Coordinator at Pflugerville ISD. And so we feel very privileged to have so many partners with us in this discussion. And the way that we look at this is that E3 really looks at starting with data, but then leverages that knowledge, experience, and wisdom that comes from talking to people about the data. So very rarely do you see E3 put out policy recommendations without having had a lot of stakeholder discussions and understanding behind what that data means so that we can go to action. And in our data presentation, Grounded in Data today, Susan mentioned some of that data that we talk about that really is foundational to the discussion that we're going to have today, which is our school readiness data. And just to give some context, in 2008, when the goals for the Blueprint for Educational Change were developed, one of the goals were that all students enter school ready for kindergarten. And at that point, there was no statewide kindergarten readiness assessment, and the assessments that were available were literacy assessments point in time that were like the TPRI or just a section of letter sounds, letter identification. And our Central Texas community said that's not school readiness. School readiness is much broader and has social emotional components. It has language and communication components. And because we talked with the community, we developed a kindergarten readiness standard that was formative, that was based on observational assessment, and that actually matched student and teacher relationships. So it was this student with this teacher, how are they doing at the beginning of the year? And that let us know a lot of information. Over the years, we've been able to tie the scores on that assessment with later school success. And it's a highly predictive tool of looking at later school success, but it lets us know that we don't necessarily have to just change the student, but also what can we do to support the teacher in those classrooms. So when we talk about school readiness, a lot of the perspective we're taking is not just students being ready for school, but schools being ready for the children they have. And this becomes more important this year than any other year I think that we've had in a long time, as we have children coming in with vastly different experiences that mean we need a different level of support as we go forward. And so that's kind of the grounding in our presentation today of the E3 model and how we're working together. So our session objectives are going to be really understanding the important links between pre-K and later school success. This is from national data and our local data from the kindergarten readiness study. We also are going to learn from our esteemed panel of educators and advocates on how we're going to accelerate change during this year and beyond, and what can we do to support and accelerate change. So really appreciate your time to look at these. If you were in our earlier session, we did have a reflection document that I think Kara, our tech support, can put in the chat for us. This is a reflection of what can we do in our roles to accelerate change for our youngest learners. This is an essential question that we're going to be answering over the course of the day today through the keynote. with Sylvia Acevedo, our data presentation, and then student panel and breakout sessions. And then with our closing with Dr. Ben, we want to get at kind of our role in accelerating change, but not just with the people that you see in this room, but how do we broaden that to have a more inclusive approach? Because what we have learned from our learning is that E3's model has been very much what you see right now. Educators, advocates, folks at the table. And this year we're really expanding to say, where are our students? Where are our parents? Where are our families? And how do we make that connection as well? So that as we're coming up with solutions and building out strategies, we're doing that in an inclusive way that is informed. Because when we do not, we find our approaches are less equitable, less rich, and less effective. And so as we're going through the conversation today, I hope you can keep this as top of mind and that we are able to do that. The document that we're using is a Google Sheet that will make you make a copy. And then it is yours forever. We are not using it, and we'll have a little bit of time, hopefully at the end of the panel, for you to take some reflection, but wanted to give that as a kind of participatory guidance and anticipatory guidance. So it wouldn't be an E3 presentation without some data, and then we're going to start with that. What we know about pre-K and later school success is that we really see that pre-K enrollment and attendance in full day low ratio pre-K programs have kids more likely to be ready when they enter kindergarten. And this is really important because I mentioned that kindergarten readiness assessment is strongly linked to later school success. But this full day low ratio piece is a key piece of that information, because any pre-K shows more positive results than no pre-K. But there are certain factors that are associated with quality that really help children have more rounded approaches to their learning when they enter kindergarten classrooms. So it's relating to peers, language and communication, and foundational to that. Letters and numbers to some extent, although we see those catching up. Where we see the big input is social emotional skills and language and communication skills. And those happen more deeply and to a higher degree in our full day low ratio programs. And when I say low ratio, I do mean what we were able to look at in the data set is no more than 15 students to one teacher and paraprofessional aide. And so we do look at aides and teachers together in that framework. And when we talk to our educators and get that wisdom from why this is, it's because when you have adults in the classroom that are having intentional one-on-one interaction with students, language develops at a higher rate. And when you have more time to deeply discuss, you have that. And half-day programs typically have more sit and get opportunities for students, and full-day programs typically have more exploration and language-rich opportunities for students. It's not necessarily that way for every program, but on average in Central Texas, that's what we found. In addition, students that attend full-day pre-K perform better on third grade reading and math STAR, and that is regardless of whether they're kindergarten ready. If they attended a pre-K program and they were kindergarten ready, that performance is even greater. And so we see this as strongly tied to later school success. We see this tied in Central Texas with our Central Texas schools for multiple years and multiple cohorts of kids. And this just reemphasizes that fact. This is the differential between children staying at home or children enrolling in a pre-K program year after year after year. And this is regardless of whether kids are eligible for pre-K. This is just the conditions that we see in Central Texas raw without any factor or regression analysis tied to it. So we also know that full day pre-K is associated with more enrollment from families, that this is a program that more meets families' needs, that is able to help them, especially if their older siblings already enrolled in the school. We see this as a big draw. And in fact, in our districts that have gone either from full day to half day or half day to full day, we see this differential being much greater. And we've seen, I think Leander is going to be an example of that. They had been a traditional half day program and have gone to full day. And Kendra shared with us her enrollment numbers, and my eyes got really big because they are at least twice what their enrollment numbers historically have been. And so that's been our experience with that it widens the access of kids to this high quality program. So we also have some other news in it that's not as encouraging. We have what we know has been engagement and access rates. And in the spring of 2020, we call that emergency school. This was not virtual school. This was no one was prepared for on March 13th, getting the call saying, don't come to school today. I remember that as a parent. that we were not having school today, that was a big change. And so when we saw that, we saw the lowest engagement rates, and this was reported in crisis codes for pre-K. And this is lower than any other grade. And it was difficult to understand how to engage, have the equipment, have the supplies, and get them to parents and families to make that engagement happen. But we lost touch with students. We weren't able to engage them to a certain extent, and they just didn't show up for that emergency school. And so we were already feeling kind of untethered from our pre-K students in the spring of 2020. In the current school year, when we look at fall to fall comparisons of enrollment, Susan mentioned this morning, we saw a 29% drop in pre-K enrollment in Central Texas. And this was especially hard because we had seen an increase in pre-K enrollment because so many of our schools had already gone to full day, and we were seeing that bump. We saw a 29% drop, and we also saw that this drop was quite a bit steeper than what we saw in the state of Texas. In the state of Texas as a whole, pre-K enrollment fall to fall was dropped at 21%. It was more in Central Texas, and we do believe it is because of our full day programming in Central Texas, it's higher. And without that support, we saw greater enrollment have a greater drop. So really, we have a history of taking this knowledge, the data knowledge, to action and identifying these factors associated with school success and policies that could accelerate pre-K. And I've already mentioned a couple of them, but I just wanted to say that as part of the Success by Six group, we facilitate a pre-K work group that focuses on how do we increase access and quality to pre-K programs. And we've done a great job. Since 2013, we've seen a change from students that were in high ratio half-day programs, low ratio half-day programs, really moving into that quality condition of low ratio full-day pre-K. And when we started this work, just 5% of students were in that type of a pre-K program. In 2019, before the pandemic, we had raised that to 45%, which is a 9-fold increase. And that is pretty amazing over time. And keep in mind, this was before the funding for full day pre-K came through at the state. These were local policy decisions that were happening because people were seeing that this quality mattered to later school success. Another exciting thing that has happened, and again, this has just been fantastic to see, is that we really encouraged enrollment in 3-year-old pre-K. In Texas, there are very few funding streams to support young children. And when we started this in 2013-14, what we found out was there's a funding stream to support 3-year-olds in public school pre-K, but And the but was, if you serve one eligible 3-year-old, you had to serve all eligible 3-year-olds. And no district that was contemplating that could just flip the switch and say, we're doubling our pre-K enrollment. We don't have the facility space. We don't have the other things. And what we were able to do is have a business coalition talk to TEA, and they changed the rules and allowed a wait list. So school districts could pilot 3-year-old pre-K and see how it went. And we've had over 100-fold increase in just a few short years in the number of 3-year-olds who are enrolled in pre-K in Central Texas. And we've really increased the number, we've doubled the number of districts that have pre-K enrollment over 30 kids since 2013. So that is encouraging news of taking the data, understanding what the barriers are, and then creating action to increase access for our youngest students, and also really be great stewards of public funds that support our young children. And so I wanted to share that with you as we go. This is a history in Central Texas of moving faster than the state. And that is one of the reasons E3 was founded, of saying, what could we do? Because moving the state the size of Texas is a Herculean task. So just to recap, there are a lot of really good reasons for the importance of pre-K. We know that that's a key time for brain development. We also know the importance, and we heard from our student panel today about the need for safe space for connection, learning, and belonging in the classroom. And I think anyone who's been in a pre-K classroom knows that that is key and foundational to the work. And one of the missions of a pre-K teacher is setting that foundation in a relationship base. Also, we know it supports young children and their families. Not only supports them in the educational setting, but we know it allows parents to work. We know that it allows families to understand the education process in a family-friendly way, and that is a stair step for building those relationships that go all through the educational pipeline. And the data that we already discussed, research shows that we're more likely to be building better readers and mathematicians if we start with the foundational skills that are in pre-K, and that pre-K as an intervention program, which it is, works. And so those are things to kind of keep in mind as we go through our fantastic pre-K panel. And so now I get to stop and just ask questions and introduce our wonderful panel, and they'll come up spotlighted. You might want to change to speaker view in your Zoom. That should be, for a lot of people, on your upper right side. You'll see the view button, but that way they'll be highlighted as you go through. But we have Amy Cortes-Castillo, as I mentioned, Director of Early Childhood at Austin ISD, David Feigen, our Early Childhood Policy Associate from Texans Care for Children, Kendra Winans, who is a Senior Director of State and Federal Programs at Leander ISD, and Charlotte Zemo, who is our Early Childhood Coordinator at Pflugerville ISD. And so we're so glad you guys could all join us today. Well, David, I'm going to put you on the spot first. We talked a little bit about what we've seen change in Central Texas and the scope of pre-K quality and the scope of also pre-K access. What do you see has changed in terms of state level issues, and what have you seen has changed kind of in the feel and scope of policy over time?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Laura, thanks for having me, and it's good to be with you guys. I'll start first by saying what I'm not. I'm not an educator. I'm not a school district administrator, but I do spend a whole lot of time in our Texas Capitol advocating for those who are. And it's really been an incredible evolution on sort of how the legislature, how state policymakers respond to this. And I think a big reason for it is all the work that's happened locally that has informed that. In 2015 was sort of the first time a lot of legislators had really thought about pre-K as a public policy that the state should be focused on, when the grant program was initially introduced that was sort of an opt-in raising of quality with funds. And In 2019, it really took a whole different turn when school finance reform took center stage, and advocates and parents and teachers and school district administrators kind of came together and ensured that pre-K was part of that conversation, and not just a peripheral part, but a foundational one, where the whole legislation, the overhaul House Bill 3, was really built on the premise that for kids to succeed later, you have to give them a strong start. And it became a bipartisan consensus that, of course, we will require full day pre-K programs. We will invest in early childhood education through the new early education allotment. And there was never any certainty that was going to happen. And I think a big reason it did was that districts really started to lead on this, and including Central Texas was a leader. So while I think some of the trends that Laura outlined for Central Texas are true statewide, it's exponentially true for those Central Texas districts. And so, I think looking at the districts is sort of where this all started. The research that is so compelling about outcomes that we with E3 and other groups were able to really center, and eventually you can't ignore it the more and more you show it. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2020. And the conversations around learning loss and the developmental milestones that are so critical and what's happening at home, all of that gave pre-K another time in the spotlight, where I think we were able to discuss its importance. So, and now we have an early childhood caucus at the state legislature, which is something we're excited to see moving forward. And a big part of that is pre-K. So we've seen a huge evolution, and I think what districts have done is sort of what made that happen.
Thank you, David. And we're going to get into what districts have done. So, really schools did a lot, had to do a lot differently this past school year. And if you guys could share just a little bit about how you pivoted learning for pre-K, that would be really helpful. And Amy, let's start with you.
Hi, Laura. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So yeah, in thinking about like last spring, you reminded me, Laura, of where this all started last March in 2020. We, in thinking about how we were going to support kids and families in pre-K, we really recognize the fact that the parent was going to be pivotal, or the caregiver was going to be pivotal in that. So everything that we've done and thought about has been kind of created on with that in mind. What is it that you have at home? What is it that you have at the ready for to help and support your child learn? So that was the spring, and then moving into this year, thinking about how are we going to build out curriculum, and thinking about what we've got children in the classroom, and we've got families at home supporting their students in remote learning, because we did have a significant number of students doing remote learning. So what we did at the district level was create blended learning curriculum utilizing 2 different platforms. So and the district went 1-to-1 for pre-K to 12. So we are a 1-to-1 district now. So pre-K through 2nd grade got iPads to support learning at home, and for parents to be able to access curriculum. We built this blended learning curriculum using Seesaw as a way for families to interact and engage with their child's teacher. Parent-facing resources were designed to support families and to support teachers with those in-class and in-person students. Curriculum, we wanted to make sure that all of our curriculum resources were developmentally appropriate. So we did not want pre-K students at home doing quote unquote worksheets at home. So we really took a deep dive into thinking about how could we support families at home, modeling after what we do in the pre-K classroom. So our curriculum resources included choice charts for families to do offline activities. They did include, using technology, and then some applications as well. So just providing families a variety of resources to help their students learn at home. And in the classroom, the teachers were able to utilize those as well.
Thank you. Kendra, what were some things that you did at Leander?
So thank you, Laura, and hello, everyone. A lot of the same things as Amy talked about. I think as educators, we steal other people's ideas and we talk and we make sure that we're thinking everything. So of course we had to get devices in the hands of our students, but more importantly was the connection with the families. And so one of the things that we did was really look at we have a program called Parents as Teachers, where it's the whole curriculum is about that the parent is the child's first and best teacher. And so we already have this pretty robust curriculum that we use for birth to 4. And how can you get those types of activities that are already things that families have in the house? You don't have to necessarily go out and buy a bunch of things. That you can use the environment around your home to really scaffold learning. And so I think that was a nice thing, a nice connection for us to rely on, is our Parents as Teachers program. Again, the family partnership was the most important thing. We were allowed to come into families' homes, and you had to partner more so than you've ever had to do in the past. And that really, I think, is something that strengthened our program. And I know we'll talk about a little bit in the future, but of what we want to see continue.
Thanks. Charlotte.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Laura. So basically, we, we did some very similar things as everyone else mentioned already. We, what people forget to think about is that not all of our the students that we served have access to internet. So making sure that we provided them hotspots, making sure that we provided them meals and breakfast and lunch, just setting up those sites. So when everything shut down, every single administrator was still on campus. Every single teacher that was available would come and help serve and pass out. So, I mean, a lot of it was just making sure that we were meeting those very fundamental needs for our parents and our students. We started off with packets, unfortunately, but that's the reality of it. Nobody talks about the very beginning stages of COVID, but that's how we started, was just packets and trying to find out ways in which we could get curriculum and books into our students' hands. We even made supply packets. We really went through every classroom and looked to see, what do we have? What can we give them? Basically their supplies back to them for them to have in baggies, because a lot of our families, unfortunately don't have access to those sorts of things at home, or they wouldn't think to have them available to them. Then, some of the later stages, like if we're talking about maybe the beginning of this year, we did transfer into a blended learning. We did a lot of similar things with Seesaw. A lot of districts did, because it was appropriate for our students. Canvas wasn't for pre-K, but Seesaw was. And we made packets, like our teachers that did blended. A lot of our teachers, we tried to have, if we could, not all campuses, but because we're such a huge district, but for the campuses that could support having one teacher serve online students and one teacher do just in person, we went ahead and did that. But for the campuses that we couldn't support that, we did the blended. And our EAs were fabulous. They would make every supply that they were doing in the classroom, any activity, we would make that in advance for parents to pick up and have access to all of those materials so that they can do it at home. And that way the student didn't feel like they were not a part of the classroom, and that they were still connected, even though they were only able to see their friends from, via Zoom. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm hearing a lot of use of tools, and even if they're old school tools, but tools and platforms. And, for those who don't know, Canvas and Seesaw are electronic platforms that help provide connection from outside or home into what's going on in the classroom. And so those are really a lot of times, for Canvas, it's student driven, and students and access Canvas and they keep in track on things. For Seesaw, it is more parent and portfolio driven. It lends itself more to portfolio and picture driven parts of the curriculum. And just, I love all that sense of how do we keep staying connected even though we're apart? And how do you balance that balancing act between in-person and home learning environments that was just going on without necessarily the predictability that we needed? Well, given all of that, what would you keep from this year that you've worked, from what you've learned over the pandemic, those tools, those connections? What might actually work better going forward? And this time, why don't we start with Kendra, and then we'll go Charlotte, Amy, and then I think David also has some things to chime in on this.
Well, as I mentioned before, the most important thing is the connection with the families. And I think we really got to learn what that looks like. It's not a parent dropping a child off and picking them up in the afternoon and sending home what your child did. It was actually being in their living rooms, working with the family, where you're almost co-teaching, if you will, and supporting that student right there just in time in their own environment. So I think there's a lot we can learn from how we connected and how we built relationships with families through that. I think there was a trust that had to develop that is critical when you are working with our youngest learners. So I think building on that, I think we really want to see students back in the classroom. We know the interaction is critical, but how can we also expand and have those families feel a part of their learning as well? So I would think that would be the main thing from what we've learned.
Thanks. Charlotte.
So some of the things that we for sure are going to keep are, just having that available to parents that can't come in, that work long hours and can't make it to meet the teacher night or parent-teacher conferences, allowing them to interact via Zoom. And one of the biggest components was the way we even qualify our students. That was huge for us, is to transfer into this digital platform, where we don't see anybody, but they're filling out these eligibility screener for us in order for us to help them in seeing if they qualify and kind of getting them fast tracked into enrollment in one of our campuses. So that was one of the biggest things that one of the hugest hurdles for us, given a district our size, was to how can we create something centralized and then be able to meet everyone's needs. And so we made it available everywhere in our community. We put it out into stores, and we put it out on bulletin boards. Had a QR code. The QR code you would scan with your phone, and it takes you directly to our screener. Those are some of the things that are very crucial and that helped and showed to be very successful for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Amy.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback off of what Kendra and Charlotte have said. So, anecdotally, we've heard from teachers and families that the relationships that they built this year were much stronger than in any other year. And, and like the other said, it just had to be that way. But that is something that we want to keep because we know that, family engagement is a part of high quality pre-K. And so finding those ways to strengthen those relationships moving forward out of the pandemic is, I think, one of the things that's going to be really nice. And I'm really happy that teachers and families were able to experience that, so that moving forward, it's like, okay, that was so powerful for me to be able to have as a teacher that relationship with the family and really support the child, get to know the needs of the family and the needs of the child at that deep level will really, I think, support our program in general. And I also want to piggyback on what Charlotte said, I think it was Charlotte, about the Zoom parenting classes. So in our Head Start program, we had AISD Head Start starting last year for pre-K3. And, sometimes it's challenging getting families to a meeting because of their schedules. They have varied schedules, and not everybody can come to the 5 o'clock meeting. Not everybody can come to the 9 o'clock meeting. So hosting the Zoom meetings, we had so much more participation this year. And we were actually, a little surprised, but really excited, because that is something we can use moving forward. We can continue to offer in person with a remote option, and then we can record those sessions and share them with the families who couldn't do either. So that's something I'm really excited about. So and stop there.
And David, what do you see from your perspective in terms of what we might keep?
Well, yeah, 1000% echo the family engagement components. I mean, that's something that we heard as well. Particularly important for the families of our English learner children or emergent bilingual kids, the children with disabilities or developmental delays. I mean, just our low income children in general, which of course make up a great percentage of our pre-K kids. That was huge. And I think related to that, and related to some of the parenting components that folks have talked about, is kind of a recognition that we need to take a whole child approach. That's not just about what happens in the classroom. It's what happens when they leave and before they get there. Making sure that families had access to food was something the district stepped up and really helped with. Making sure that mental health was centered in the classroom and not beyond it, not just the mental health of kids, by the way, but of teachers and of parents. In many cases, the mental health of the adults is what's incredibly impactful for kids. All of that, I think, is something that we should take from this. Unfortunately, really hard circumstances can breed innovation and urgency on things that needed to be dealt with. And I think that is something that we've seen across the state, and our lawmakers, I think, saw as well. So mental health, social emotional learning, engaging with parents, all of those are things that should be in a high quality program, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. But I think that now everyone's starting to see the real benefit of it, and the district leaders who stepped up were so critical to making this, I think, something that we can hopefully make last for a long time.
Yeah,
agreed.
Well, if I can add just one, I love what he just said about that, because it's like we hear that return to normal, but those things that those issues that have been sort of there for a long time, we don't want to return to the status quo of that, right? So what David was just mentioning about those things that have been issues for a long time, that the crisis made us kind of really spotlight, and then we want to move forward and continue that work, the work that we've done to improve those systems. So thank you for saying that, David.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you all. And now we're gonna a little focus on what did you decide you need to do differently for next year? And this could be anything from the lessons learned. And I'm going to kick it off by asking Charlotte, because I know there are some discussions at Pflugerville.
So for those that don't know, we actually surveyed our community, and that was about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. And we just wanted to get their take on the possibility of bringing a pre-K3 program to our district. It was huge. I mean, it was so huge, the amount of feedback that we received. And, it's funny because prior to this meeting, I actually found out yesterday that we are going to go forward with that. So we're excited, and this is definitely a new chapter for Pflugerville, but a good one, and it's one that we know that it will definitely serve our community, and so we're excited about PreK3.
Okay, I have to burst in there. I'm so excited. in 2014, when we looked at the data through Head Start and Child Care Subsidy, we were serving maybe 14% of income eligible 3-year-olds in any type of child care, Head Start, or our early childhood programming. We've gotten about to 20, just a little bit above 20%. But as districts are doing this, that there is so much room to expand. And so this is kind of exciting, guys. That's a lot differently. And there are some really great folks on this panel who are working on that as well. Kendra, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing differently.
Yes, so we're kind of on that same journey that Pflugerville's on. We actually took it to our board. Gosh, I'm trying to think of when it was. I remember having that feeling when they said, yes, let's do it, that I actually went, yes. My husband was watching on Zoom and said, I saw you say yes to that. It was very exciting times. And it was really all about access for our board. They see the need for earlier access and access for all. And so moving forward with full day pre-K, last year was our first year during a pandemic. So that was interesting, and we had to do a lot of shifting. But then we also went forward for this next year, also having a 3-year-old program that's going to last until they come early in the morning and then last till 1:15. So it's kind of a little bit more than a half day. And really that approach is all about access for all. And we are building communities where we have our special education students in our early childhood programs, our Head Start programs, our 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds, all in a community, so that we can really work on the high quality practices that we want to see for all students. And so we'll let you know how it goes, but we've already spent a little time in Austin finding out some new ways of doing things and what we should be thinking about. I think just we're going to rely on each other to work through this, but very excited that we have not put any caps on anything. We are just opening the door and saying, let's do this. So very excited for our community and our families and our students.
I love that sense of community that you're building. And Amy, you're our veteran on here for 3-year-olds. AISD has been serving 3-year-olds pilot for a while. But what are the things that you are thinking about intentionally doing differently next year?
So one of the, you talked about at the very, very beginning was the drop and dip in enrollment for pre-K. And so moving into this year, we've made several changes. We are doing the digital online screener that's available for families to apply for pre-K. And so we're really excited about that in terms of our outreach and our enrollment efforts. And then, we have been also taking enrollment out to the community. So we've this spring had what we call the PreK Enrollment Bus, and we've had that at several events where you can go to a community event and enroll, and it's fun and exciting. We have our PreK mascot out there, a little lion, just saying hello and inviting families to re-enroll and re-engage with PreK. And then one thing that I want to note here, I'm not sure if it's pandemic related. I don't think so, because we've been working on this for many years, was to introduce and improve our class size ratios. So in terms of programming, we're super excited in Austin ISD to be adding the teaching assistants in pre-K for all of our teachers and classrooms and students and families. And so I was excited to hear Charlotte talk about, how the EAs in Pflugerville supported during the remote learning. And so we are just thrilled that we're going to have 11-to-1 ratios in our pre-K 4 classrooms, and excited about the professional learning for those TAs and just improving the quality of our program overall.
And I just want to add something, how important it is when we all get on the same page. Because the first thing that happens is our HR department or our board or whomever will call other directors in HR and say, well, how are you staffing this? What are you? And it really does put the onus on the other people to step up and do that. So we're doing that too. We're lowering our ratios. We have an assistant for every classroom. But hearing this is so helpful, because when push comes to shove in budget times, people start seeing this as a priority. So that's very exciting.
Yeah.
It's so much exciting news. I know David put that into chat, but it is so much exciting news. And we had that a little bit of this echo on the statewide level. There were some bills on ratio or on class size and in early childhood and different folks moving. I don't know, David, if you wanted to speak to that at all.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, these are districts who are well ahead of state policy, right? Like you guys are going beyond minimum standard. But unfortunately, there are some that are not. And there are also some who, we needed to improve the minimum standards. And so, there's been class size bills or ratio bills or class size and ratio bills in pre-K since 1991. I mean, and they often haven't gone anywhere. Every now and then they, maybe get voted out of a committee, but don't ever get a vote on the House or Senate floor. So this session, I think buoyed by all the things we've talked about, we were able to get across the finish line a class size limit in pre-K. It's of 22. So again, we're not hoping everybody's hitting the class size limit, right? But when we have districts who unfortunately are having 30 kids in a classroom or with an untrained, maybe first year teacher in some cases, we're excited to see that roll out and just get a greater focus on pre-K. Another thing that happened this session that I think is helpful is it was really a landmark year for childcare. And, as we're hoping to serve more 3-year-olds, as we're hoping to expand opportunities for partnerships between school districts and childcare programs, having more eligible quality childcare providers across the state, especially those in our rural areas that, just don't have anyone to partner with if they wanted to, by raising the quality with all the money we're getting from the federal government, it gives us a chance, I think, to be able to serve more 3s through partnerships and, have class size limits that are reasonable. So a lot of good progress, and, the districts that continue to innovate will make it easier for districts, not just in your region, but, across the state to be able to follow suit. That's how every state progress we've made has happened, is some districts have led first and then others start to copy. And so, major hats off to y'all.
Thank you, David. And I think that I just want to go back to Kendra's point of when she said, when we talk to other districts, this is what allows us to make it happen. And we have seen this focus on the factors associated with later school success and really emphasizing the effectiveness of pre-K as a theme throughout Central Texas that has just led us through this. Is there any one thing that helped as you worked with your community, either kind of working within the Leander community, the AISD community, the Pflugerville community, or working across the community, so that maybe regionally or other effective things that helped make these changes come about and happen? And just kind of, I'll start with Kendra on this one.
Well, I keep going back to one of the things that we started in the district pre-COVID was hopes and dreams for our community. And a lot of that is about inclusiveness and access, and nothing about, I want my child to perform well on the STAR. It was more about becoming the best I can be. And so that really leverages a lot of the work that we're doing in our district. And so it was a natural connection when we go in front of the board and say, this is what you're asking for, this is what we can show you and provide you. So I think it really does come back to the community and saying, if this is what you want, this is one way that you can get there. We talk about closing the gap all the time, right? In education, it's like, I've been at it for 32 years, we've talked about closing the gap. The gap is still there. So we keep doing the same things, we're going to get the same results. So when have we ever focused this much on early childhood, early intervention, and high quality services at our youngest learners? So we are very optimistic that with that, we're going to be able to show some true closing of the gap, that you're getting to students before there's ever anything that resembles a gap. You're starting off the best that you can. And so I think that's what we've really done, is make connections from what the community has said and to what we know is best practice and what we want to see for our youngest students.
Thank you, Charlotte.
I really like that you said that, Kendra. I think kind of just to go along the lines of what you said, that's exactly what it took for Pflugerville. It took us getting finally in front of it and not trying to continue to put a Band-Aid on the situation, but get it in front of it. We made it one of our district-wide goals that we're actually including PreK, which I am super excited about. I've worked for a variety of different districts, and to be a part of something so huge, it really moves the needle. And you know, I had so many administrators reach out to me over the course of the year, wanting to know more about what our data looks like, wanting to know more and educating themselves about how does this look? What is tier 1? What does tier 2 look like? And that's something that I haven't heard or seen before in other districts that I've worked in. And so yes, it definitely made me happy, and I'm excited because our goal is a goal that it's a SMART goal that we created in the district, and it's one that you know, hopefully will continue, and I feel like there's a huge urgency, you know, and so in the fact that our superintendent is so on board with early childhood education. We have new board members that are on board with early childhood education. I mean, it just really makes a difference. So yeah, I'm really excited. And there's going to be really good things coming out of Pflugerville. So just wait and stay tuned.
I'm excited too. When E3 started meeting with our partner districts, 15 partner districts, we took every district strategic plan and mapped it and said, okay, how do we engage them with our work and look for it? And so I was looking at their early childhood goals, and I will tell you that it was slim pickings on district strategic plans that encouraged, that like spoke out about early childhood. And so that's a big shift in getting the community hopes and dreams. Amy, how are you working with the community? What do you see in terms of this work?
Yeah, so I think it's, you know, just piggybacking on what's been said already, we have many community conversations around just, you know, in general with the pandemic, you know, talking about how families are doing, what their needs are, and listening. I mean, just really listening. And, you know, prior to the pandemic, working with the community on how we think about early childhood in Austin ISD, we did convene an early childhood fellowship that lasted over the course of a year to really take a deep dive into the history of early childhood in Austin ISD, the present and current state of it, and then where do we, you know, what is our future forward? And so part of that was like the ratios was a big part of that. We have to get those ratios down. So that's been something that we've been working on for, you know, many years, even prior to my tenure as the director. So it's really exciting to that happen. And, you know, we do get input from teacher roundtables. Like one of the questions we showed that It's No Small Matter documentary to teachers, and you know, of course they're like, they have you know, there's an assistant, there's another adult, we want to do these, we want to be able to take our kids outside in a small group and talk to them and really engage with them, but we, you know, we have to watch the other, you know, 15 in the classroom. So just really hearing from teachers and parents on what their needs are has driven a lot of our program decisions. And then, you know, what somebody said earlier, I think it was you, Laura, about being ready for the student, this not flipping that narrative about the student being ready for school, but for the school to be ready for the student and meet them where they walk in the door, and then leading them to the next level. And so I think that's one thing, that working with the community, thinking about where kids and families, where they are, because everybody's at a different point, everybody has different needs. And as the school being kind of that pillar in the community, we want to be able to invite everybody and say, we will meet you where you are, and we will take you to, you know, to meet your hopes and dreams. And it's a relationship. So anyway, that's just something I always like to think about as we're working with kids and families is that, we can do this together.
Awesome. I love how you brought that back to our theme today too. I think we just have time for a short closing question. I didn't see any questions come up through chat. And so I'm going to just go ahead and kind of mesh our two last questions that our panel had is like, what must we do to help students and what's next all together? And I think we'll start with Charlotte this time.
Thank you. So, it's funny because Amy just said exactly what we kind of need to do next is just that we need to start teaching students how they learn best. And a lot of that is kind of geared towards this whole awareness of UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. It's something that Texas, you don't hear much talk about in our school districts in Texas. I feel like it's going to take a couple years. It might be something, it might hit us like SEL did in a big way, and then districts will be scrounging to figure out what are we going to do to meet this need. But I feel like it's always been there. It's nothing new. It's just a matter of a mindset shift in that direction. So really goes back to Tier 1 instruction. So yes, that's what needs to happen.
Awesome. Amy, I'm gonna call on you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. That, and just what I said prior is really using our data in a really informative way, where we have students coming in, walking in the door and doing those authentic assessments to find out what their needs are, and then finding that zone of proximal development and moving them to their next level, and helping even 4-year-olds can talk about what did I learn. We look at the plan, do, review kind of model where it's like I'm going to plan what I'm learning today, and this is where I am, and this is what I want to learn next. And so I just again kind of agree with what Charlotte said, that we have to think about where each child is and then help each child move forward in their learning.
So important as kids are coming in at different stages, and no one knows this as much as a pre-K teacher. Kendra, would you like to share with us what's next?
So exactly what they said, we have to meet the students and the families where they are, but we also need to do it through play and exploring and do it the right way. So, other than that, I think the impacts of what we've gone through are going to be long lasting, and we're going to have to, again, pivot and adjust. But if we have that focus on the child and we're moving it that direction, we're in good shape. So lots of professional development will be coming our way. We have a pretty dynamic team that's already outlined all the different things that need to happen. Lots of inclusive practices, because I think we're going to be doing a lot of scaffolding. And I think Charlotte and Amy said it best. It's meeting them where they're going to be.
Awesome. David, what's next for us as a state with pre-K?
There's a lot. Everything that everyone said. I mean, I think, we still need to move to full day pre-K across the state. It's required now, but implementation was disrupted pretty significantly. Bringing kids back to the classroom after the learning loss they've gone through. I mentioned pre-K partnerships, I think and pre-K 3 is a big thing across the state. We have a lot of work left to do. And I'll just add, I touched on them earlier, but emergent bilingual and English learner children is something we've done a lot of work on this session. There's a lot more to do. This is a critical age for language development, and this is when it really starts. And so making sure we have access to high quality dual language immersion and effective teaching for those kids is going to be really important. And shameless plug, we have a whole roadmap on bilingualtexas.org that I encourage folks to check out.
It's not a shameless plug. You can put it in the chat, even if you would like. I'm going to just very quickly share my screen to remind you of our essential question, working together. Look at that, see what you think from today's panel. It was fantastic. Thank you all. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that we are plugging PreK Enrollment. We're going to do another push in July. So look for these resources. They are on our landing page for this event. But we have resources for parents as well as educators and advocates to promote PreK registration, because we want this year to be an amazing PreK registration year. So thank you guys so much. And we really, really appreciate all your time today.